Boom. It's already posted on my X account. We're live. We have lots of good news today. I probably would have changed the headline of the tweet based on the news that we just got out of Georgia expanding their school choice program. But we have so much good news, we couldn't figure out what headline to put. So we're definitely going to talk about Idaho moving to ban taxpayer funding of teachers unions. A lot of people are like, why in the world are teachers unions getting any taxpayer funded benefits in the first place? Yeah, it looked like that bill in Idaho was going to die. It's been revived, and it seems like it's off to the governor's desk very, very shortly. So, Chip, how's it going with you today?
Another great day. As you mentioned, those two bills plus a lot more really good things happening. So, good day for the kids in America.
That's right. All right. So, everybody, if you're hopping on, looks like people are hopping on pretty quickly today. This is the Red Pen Podcast, powered by Americans for Fair Treatment. I'm your co-host, Corey DeAngelis. I'm a senior fellow with Americans for Fair Treatment and also a research fellow at the Heritage Foundation. And my co-host, if you haven't met him by now, he's Chip Rogers. He's the CEO of Americans for Fair Treatment. And he was also the Senate Majority Leader in Georgia. And we're going to go over some real good news out of Georgia today in just a second. But first, we're going to talk about Idaho. Check this out. A lot of people are excited about this. I thought it was dead for the year, but the bill has been revived to get rid of taxpayer funding of teachers unions in Idaho, which raises the question, why in the world were the teachers unions getting taxpayer funded benefits in the first place? You can make the argument for taxpayers funding the school system, but for funding teachers unions activities seems totally ridiculous. So the backstory here, and Chip knows this, we've been following it very closely, is that the House voted weeks ago to pass this bill overwhelmingly. It was similarly like 40 to 20 or something like that, but it sailed through the House. It went to the Senate. And in the Senate, you have these committee processes. The bill's supposed to pass through a committee. And then once it passes through the committee, it goes to the floor for a vote. Well, it got bottled up in a Senate committee in Idaho. And the word on the street was that this bill was getting bottled up for years. And it had to go through different committees because the chair was not letting their committee actually vote on the bill. And so it never, even though we knew they had the votes on the floor, it never got to that point. And so this year, the chair of the committee that it was stuck in was a guy named Dan Foreman. He says he's a Republican. He's a senator in Idaho. And what really just made people really crazy this year was that this guy was listed as a co-sponsor on the bill. And so when people were telling me, hey, we're hearing the word on the street, different senators were saying this, people within Idaho politics were DMing me saying, the guy who's a co-sponsor on the bill, he's the one that's actually the problem. He's not putting it up for a vote. And so we started letting time go by, and we're like, okay, well, it actually seems like this is what's actually happening. The other day, there was a senator who's a very conservative guy named Brian Lenny. He was on the floor, and they were at the moment in the session where they're going and trying to amend different bills. He offered an amendment to a totally separate bill on the floor, and they call this a radiator cap, basically hijacking another bill and saying, I know this bill that we want was stuck in committee. We're going to replace the text of that bill that we really wanted, banning taxpayer-funded funding of teachers union activity, and we're going to insert that language into this bill that's on the floor. And they barely passed it on the floor from what I heard. And then just yesterday, I believe, the Senate passed the bill 20-14 with all six Democrats voting against. Who were the other 8 votes, you ask? They were Republicans who voted with all the Democrats to try to allow for the forced taxpayer funding of teachers union activity in a Republican state. It's just beyond belief almost, but it passed 20-14. It needs one more vote in the House. It passed the House on a procedural vote to accept the amendment from the Senate today. 41-23. And so what I hear is that now it just needs one more kind of procedural vote on the House floor. Then it goes to Governor Brad Little. What are your thoughts, Chip?
A lot here. First, what you mentioned about Senator Foreman is really what makes people hate politics. It's people who say one thing and do another, that go back and forth. Look, if you get new information on any topic and you can come out and say, hey, this is what I knew. Now I have new information and I'm changing my mind and explain it. That's fine. That happens to everybody. You should actually legislate in that way upon receiving new information. This is not new information. This is a very, very, very simple issue. And that is, should taxpayers be funding these type of activities for any union or any outside private organization? Teachers union is not a public institution. That is a private organization. Should taxpayers be paying for that? Of course not. So this is very simple on its face. I also would have a question with those 6 Republicans that voted against this. I guarantee you that each and every one of them goes back to their district and routinely says, I am a fiscally conservative legislator. I am not wasting the people's money. But this is wasting their money. This is an inappropriate expenditure that you had the chance to stop, and yet you voted the other way. So don't go back and campaign. Now, if you want to go home and campaign and say, listen, I'm a Republican, but I like to spend a lot of money. I don't mind funding unions. I don't mind wasting all this money. Go ahead and do that and let the voters decide. But just be honest. Don't go back and say, I'm a fiscally conservative Republican, but I'm going to vote to waste this money like this on something that's completely inappropriate. So again, the taxpayers win in this particular case. Hoping Governor Little signs it. I suspect he will. He's done a pretty good job of being the governor there in Idaho. And, we were obviously very supportive of this. We're most common sense thinking people that said this is not how money should be used, especially, Corey, as you and I know, and we document this literally every day, that these organizations have functionally become arms of political parties. Like these are,
Right.
if what they were doing was working on behalf of teachers, providing extra opportunities for certification, providing legitimate insurance needs that teachers have, providing other sorts of training and support for teachers, that's one thing. But the reality is they've just become political arms. And there's no way that taxpayers should be funding these political activities. So kudos to the Idaho legislature. Kudos to the members that went around the system the best they could to get something right done. And thank you for their extra efforts in making that happen.
It was a big win with Brian Lenny going on the floor and saying, nope, we're going to hijack this bill. We're going to take it over and we're going to do the taxpayer-funded, the ban of taxpayer-funded teachers unions. And look, these unions they're still state affiliates, even in a red state, of these far left institutions at the national level. The Idaho Education Association is an affiliate of the National Education Association, which is headed by Becky Pringle, who is an at-large member still of the Democrat National Committee. And 98% of their funding politically goes to Democrats. So it should become the political kiss of death for Republicans in a deep red state. The problem is, Chip, I think in these deeper red states where they only have 6 people in the Senate who identify as Democrats, you have a lot of the Democrats who will just say they're Republicans just so that they have a better chance of getting into office. And then once they win that vote, get into their seats, they go and lock arms with the Democrats all too often. And so I want to highlight a quick video from Dan Foreman, who was a co-sponsor of the bill, mind you, the chair of the committee who blocked it to try to kill a bill banning taxpayer-funded activities for teachers unions. Here he is when Brian Lenny, the conservative senator, came up and offered this amendment. Who was the first guy to show his face and say, I object to this radiator cap amendment? Here is no other than Dan Foreman.
Attempt to radiator cap the bill and thereby circumvent the committee process and the will of the body as expressed in the body's previous vote on the substance of the proposed amendments. I encourage a no vote.
Thank you, Senator.
So there he is, encouraging everybody to do a no vote. When it came to the actual floor vote in the Senate, he was nowhere to be found. I think he was the only person absent. So I guess he knew it was totally hypocritical for him to still be listed as a co-sponsor. And then, I'm urging everybody to vote against this proposal. So it's
Well, Corey, what makes it even worse is, let's use his own words against him. He said that the bill circumvents the will of the body. Well, that's not true, because the body just voted in favor of it. The only person circumventing the will of the body was him, when he was keeping it bottled up in his own committee and not allowing the body to vote on it. That was the person that was circumventing the will of the political body, in this case, the Idaho Senate. So thank goodness that the Senate decided to move around the obstacle, which was the person circumventing the will of the body, Senator Foreman.
Yeah. It was the will of Dan Foreman, and he wasn't getting his way. So now he's kicking and screaming, stomping his feet. And just look at him in this picture. All you see is his forehead, because he's looking down. I think he knows this is going to backfire on him. It's just a bad idea, and he doesn't believe what he's saying.
If taxpayer dollars should be used to fund private organizations, why can't they fund the gun owners of Idaho? Why can't they fund the Restaurant Association of Idaho? I mean, we can go all the way down the list. And the reality is this just not something that taxpayers should be funding? If you're a union or any type of association or organization, raise money the way you should raise it, in a legal way, spend it the way you should spend it, in a legal way. I would suggest not getting involved in politics. But if you are going to get involved in politics, don't ask the taxpayers to fund it.
That's exactly right. So what do you give the Idaho legislature going around this committee, which, by the way, you're right. He didn't let it go through the committee process. He might have had the votes in that committee. He probably did, but he didn't allow it to be even put up for a vote. And so, yes, they circumvented the chair of the committee, but not the will. The will of the body was a 2014 vote to pass the bill. So, yeah, what's your grade?
Give him a B+. It's sad that there are folks on either side of the aisle that think it's okay to fund these organizations using taxpayer dollars. So, because of those 14 people, I'm going to have to give this the B+.
All right, sounds good. We got some great news out of Georgia. Oh my goodness, we didn't know that this was going to make it through the House, because there's been a long time, kind of for the past few years at least, back and forth with the House and Senate, where the Senate's kind of been the better body on school choice. They passed a universal school choice bill a few years ago. It went to the House, and then and all Republicans in the Senate in Georgia passed that bill. I think it was forget his name. Who's the senator that ran that bill in Georgia, the universal school choice bill? He's running for lieutenant governor now.
Dolezal.
It was Dolezal.
Greg Dolezal. Yeah,
and it moved over to the House, and they watered down the bill. It's now for students in failing schools. I believe that's a quarter of all of the schools and the students in the state, which is a good step in the right direction. It's an education savings account program, but it was also capped partially because of the House to only a certain amount of funding, which really made it tough for meaningful school choice to happen. And so there was a great proposal in the Senate that passed party line 30-20. And, a lot of people in our circles were pushing for the speaker, John Burns, to put it up for a vote. And it looks like it happened. I believe this happened yesterday. The vote was overwhelmingly in favor of doubling that cap on the school choice program. Now, I will tell you, I don't think it should have a cap at all, because it should just be based on supply and demand. If this many families want choice, it shouldn't be kind of arbitrarily limited based on whatever the government says that number should be, that's allowed to escape their public schools. But at the end of the day, this is a huge step in the right direction. It's a doubling, essentially, of that tax credit scholarship program in Georgia, a school choice program. And basically, what did you say, Chip? Every Republican voted in favor? Or basically?
One did not vote, but it could have been sick. I'm not sure. But every Republican voted in favor. So I got a lot of history on this one, Corey, so I'm going to take our viewers back in history. When this bill was first created, there's a dear friend of mine, Representative David Cassis, who is not in the Georgia General Assembly anymore, unfortunately, because he was an amazing representative. And he passed this out of the House. And when it came to the Senate, I was at the time the Senate Finance Chair. The House told us that if we sent it back to them, they probably wouldn't have the votes. In fact, the rules in Georgia allow the House Speaker to keep the vote open as long as he or she possibly wants. The Senate rules are different. You have 60 seconds to vote. So they told us, look, he kept it open for 15 minutes and stared down every member until you got the final vote. And as soon as he got the final vote, he clicked it, locked it, and then sent it to the Senate. So as you know, in the legislative process, oftentimes a bill will come from one body, go to the other. It gets slightly changed or significantly changed. It has to go back and forth, as we were talking about with Idaho. But if the bill comes out of the House or the Senate and goes to the other body and just gets approved, then it goes straight to the governor's desk. We knew we had the votes in the Senate to pass it. As you mentioned, the Senate had at that time was definitely the more, we'll call it progressive on this particular issue. And so I told my committee members, do not offer any amendments. I'm not accepting any amendments. Even if you find a typographical error, we'll let that be changed later. You're allowed to do that in law. I said, but we're not amending this bill in any way, shape, or form. And so we passed that to committee, took it to the Senate, and then I had to do what known as an engrossment back in those days and ask for the bill not to be changed or amended in any way, because someone could have put up all sorts of popular amendments just for the purpose of getting it amended. And if they'd have done that, it would have been very difficult to vote against those popular amendments. And so we had to engross the bill so no more changes could be applied to it, which we did. Sent it to the governor, and it was signed into law. Now, the interesting thing is when that happened back in the early 2000s, the cap was 25 million. Now, the reason that this is so important, and I want to thank a long history of people who actually got us to this point, Representative David Cassis, Senator Eric Johnson, who was such a champion on this, Speaker Pro Tem, still the Speaker Pro Tem, Jan Jones in Georgia, who's been amazing on this issue through the years. So many good people that helped, Representative Earl Earhart, a dear friend of mine. But we started with $25 million cap. And what happens every year in Georgia is the first day that you're allowed to apply for the scholarships, they take all the scholarships. And when the cap is filled, the cap is filled. Every year since then, and we're talking like 20 years now, on the day that this thing opens up, the cap gets hit because there's so much demand for it. And they kept raising the cap. And as it stands today, it's at 125 million. The bill that just passed would double that to 250 million. And so Casey Carpenter, Representative Casey Carpenter out of the House, deserves a ton of credit for this. The leadership that was shown to make this happen is going to help tens of thousands of kids. And I'm going to close on this because, you know, I did have, at least I think, a pretty successful career in politics. And people ask me all the time, well, what was probably your most memorable moment? And I'm going to give this story and hopefully people will run with it and remember that these the type things is why lawmaking actually matters. So I had at that time moved on a few years later to become the Senate leader. And it was right near the end of session. And you know how this is, Corey, you follow this stuff. You're fighting over the budget. You got a million things happening. And so from my office in the Capitol, I had to walk across the street. And I was literally trying to hug the wall around. I didn't want to walk through the middle of the Capitol because everyone would come start asking me for stuff. Usually money to put in the budget was what they wanted because we were in the final couple of days. But this gentleman who was a constituent came over, he started talking to me. I would always talk to constituents, of course. And another guy positioned himself right behind me, or right behind that guy. So I could not see him. And so when I got done with my conversation, the guy said, come here, I want to introduce you to some folks, some kids. And of course I said, absolutely. So I go over, and I want people to think about this because we talk about these numbers, we talk about these votes. I want to humanize this for a minute because it really matters in these kids' lives. In Georgia and in other places, these student scholarship organizations can create their own criteria for how the scholarships are given out. In this particular case, this organization had said, we're only going to give the scholarships to kids coming out of public housing. So these are the kids that are probably the poorest of the poor, in the worst condition for housing and in the worst schools. And so I go over to talk to these kids, and there were 8 beautiful young children, and they all had on their uniforms at their new schools. And I talked to this one little 9-year-old girl. I'll never forget this for the rest of my life. And I've told this story 1,000 times, and it still gives me chills. And I look at this girl and I say, tell me the difference between your old school and your new school. And she looks at me with these big brown eyes, and she says, at my new school, I feel safe, and my teacher tells me she loves me every day. And that just crushed me, because I'm like, wow, I'm so worried about, what are we going to do on the budget? What are we going to do on this? And I sometimes forget that, the things that we do can have such a positive impact on people. And this little 9-year-old girl was in a school where she didn't feel safe. She was in a school where she didn't feel like her teacher loved her. Now she's in a completely different setting. And I ask the people that are watching, as I've done all along when I tell this story, do you think she's in a better place now? Do you think her education had a better opportunity of making a difference in her life when she felt safe and felt loved? Of course. And that's what these things do, is they give kids an opportunity that they may not or probably would not have had prior to this. And that story sticks with me and will for the rest of my life. But when we do these things, and you see Corey and I get excited about this legislation passing, it's because we know that little girls, like that 9-year-old girl I spoke to in the middle of the Georgia Capitol 20 years ago, her life was impacted in a very positive way because we're able to do things like this. And so these things actually do matter.
What's crazy to me is, you hear that example, and then I've seen votes in the past where you've had union-backed politicians vote against simple, minor school choice programs just for the least advantage, like for low-income kids or even just for special needs kids. I think there's been amendments before, if I recall correctly, to only allow for scholarships for kids either if they've been bullied or abused in the public school system, and you've still had union-backed politicians block even for the kids who are being abused in the public schools. They can't get a scholarship either because they're either afraid it's going to become popular in other groups as well, or just because their special interests that control them wouldn't allow it to happen. It's just crazy to me that, you can see how it's helping individual students. And it goes beyond academics, right? It's the safety, it's the family's values. I mean, a lot of families don't want to send their kids to a school that's working against everything they're trying to do at home.
Look, if you can look at a 9-year-old girl and tell her she needs to be in an unsafe school where her teacher doesn't love her, and you can go home and sleep at night, you are an evil person. I'm just going to put it out there. That's just a level of probably some sort of mental illness if you can do that to children. Look, all these kids want is a chance. They just want a chance. And you know who knows best about the chance they need? It's not the government. It's not some random school district line that was created based on their postal mailing address. It's the parents. And when the parents say, look, just give me an opportunity to put my kid in the best possible learning space, if we as society can't do that, what are we doing? Like, this is crazy. Like, this is such a simple issue, but there are some evil people out there that care more about power than they do kids. And we're going to talk about that in this example that a Minnesota teacher amazingly was willing to come out and discuss. I'm surprised she actually said it. We'll talk about that later.
Yeah, let's hit that one. That's actually next on the list. And I just shuffled around the list, so Chip didn't know that one was coming next. So there's a great segue. But what do you think about the Georgia House doubling school choice? What's your grade?
Going to give it an A, because to take that to
All right.
250 million means probably another 20,000 kids.
Boom.
It's going to be great.
Excellent. I agree. All right. So here's what you were referring to. I posted this video of a Minnesota teacher went and had the audacity to go testify on this bill, this House File 3490 in Minnesota, and I believe it was about opting into the new Trump school choice program. It's a tax credit scholarship program, and she basically said the quiet part out loud. Here's the quote. She says that we can't have school choice because, quote, donations to private schools would decrease tuition, making private school more affordable to more middle-class families. So I'll pull up the audio real quick so people can hear it.
This bill would weaken public schools in 3 main ways. First, tax credits given for donated money to private schools leaves less in the state tax revenue pool to fund public education. Second, if this bill went into effect, donations to private schools would decrease tuition, making private school more affordable to more middle-class families, decreasing enrollment at public schools, further defunding them.
Seems like she's very interested in preserving the institution and pointing out that, wealthy people might still be able to pay for private school out of tuition, but it's going to make it more affordable to middle income folks too, who might not be able to afford it today, to pay twice, once to the property tax system and again out of pocket for a private school that's working better for their kids. I mean, they're just really revealing their true colors here.
Well, Corey, one, I'm going to start with this is a common argument they make, and it's such simple math, and I'm not sure how they get away with it. The media is just duplicitous in this and very dishonest, and perhaps in many cases just not very bright themselves. But in education, everywhere in education, in every state, in every local government, every single place in America, you fund based on the number of students. You fund on a per pupil basis. So let's just take whatever state you're in, and there's a child in District A. When that child moves from District A to District B, if District A loses one child and District B gains one child, the state funding at a minimum follows that child to the new district. That's the way it works everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be foolish to suggest that it doesn't work that way, because then you would be funding, like Chicago does, empty schools, right? Because if all the kids moved out, you're going to continue to send the money to an empty school.
And the school is 97%
Right.
empty. It's crazy.
So everywhere funding follows the child. That only makes sense. And so what she's saying, and being very dishonest about it, either she's dishonest or she just doesn't understand what she's saying. Either way is dangerous. Is that even when a child leaves a school, we should still keep sending more money. Well, that's absurd. And the real math shows you is that the money that continues to go to that school, because usually the portion that does follow the child is only a small portion of that, maybe half at the most, that the remaining money stays in the school they were in, which means the students in that school, by definition, now have more funding per child, right? Now, what they like to talk about, because they like to make the waters all murky, is like, well, there's less total money going to that. Well, yeah, there's less total money going to that school because there's less children, there's less students. Again, you don't fund empty schools, but there's more money per child. And most of these folks know it, which is why they have to lie, because the real reason, Corey, and she pointed it out, and I am shocked that she said this out loud, this has nothing to do with money. This has always, always, always had to do with control over children. You know that, and I know that, and most of the people that look into that finally figure it out, is that, yeah, they'll tell the teachers, oh, this is all about money and funding, and they'll get them all riled up. But the reality is it's never been about that. It is 100% about making sure that they control the children and not the parents or not any other option that might be best for the child. It has always been about that. It will always be about that. So when you ask yourselves, wait a minute, why would teachers' organizations fight against school choice when you still have the same number of students? So you're still going to need the same number of teachers. So why would they be fighting about it? Because it's not about that. It's about the control. It's always been about the control.
Yeah. We can't make it more affordable for lower income families to have a choice to get out of our schools, to go somewhere else with the values that are aligned with their household. It reminds me of the Texas school choice fight in 2023, because, in the same bill, there was a lot of stuff combined, and it still didn't get it across the finish line in the first iteration, but until the primaries happened and they basically got a new house in Texas. But what they tried to do was put teacher salary increases in there. They also included like billions of dollars in additional public school funding. I think it was like $5 billion or more in public school funding, additional to what they're already spending in Texas public schools. But the initial proposal was only $500 million for school choice. And so what you had were the union-backed politicians voted against $5 billion and more money for the public schools, just because a tiny sliver of that, half a billion, was going to go to letting families choose to take their kids somewhere else. So that, to me, really was like a light bulb moment of, this is really about control, right? Because if it was about money, you would have said, okay, look, 5 or 8 billion or whatever it was, that's more than the $500 million that's going to school choice. We should take this as a win, even if there's some things that we don't like in the bill. But they all voted against it. They blocked it. It ultimately led to multiple special sessions. It ultimately led to primaries. There's a new house in Texas. It's more conservative, and they passed the Better School Choice program, which is now $1 billion is the budgeted amount, which still is not enough in a big state like Texas. I didn't have a tweet on this where I'm not going to put it on the screen, but off the top of my head, they just closed the application window. It was open for like 8 weeks or a couple months in Texas. And this is their first year of their school choice program that just passed. And there's only about 90,000 scholarships available if you do the math on the $1 billion. over 274,000 students applied in the first year. You do the quick percentage, that's over 4.5% of the entire Texas school age population, with people knowing that, there was updates every few days of what the scholarship applications were like. After the first day, the first day alone, there was like 50,000 applications or so. So, in the minds of parents, they're thinking these scholarships are already taken up, especially once you got past 90, 100,000, and they were still applying for the chance that they might get it. So what I'm trying to say is that if you didn't have this arbitrary cap, if people knew that they could get the scholarship if they applied, you'd probably have a lot more than 274,000 applying. But even that said, that's still a large percentage of the population of school-age kids in Texas, even just in the first year with a couple months, with not a ton of advertising behind it. So this tells you that school choice is necessary. It's in demand right now in Texas. But that really reminded me of the fight that went on here, where more money, but it was just, we're not going to take that because we don't want school choice. We won't be able to control those kids anymore.
This is great, Corey, because the Minnesota example we just showed, the one you referenced in Texas from a few years ago, again and again and again proves the point that we've been talking about, which this is about control. And then you've got to ask yourself, well, if it's control, why do they want to control? Like, what's the purpose of controlling the education of these children? We're not going to get into that today, but I'll let everyone decide for themselves. But it's probably not to make them be, more proud of their country, more in line with the constitutional principles, more understanding that we live in a republic, not a democracy, which is the most ridiculous thing that I continue to hear. Do you know the word democracy is not mentioned in our founding documents ever, but the word republic is like hundreds of times. But my point is that they don't want to control these children to make them more independent, rugged individualists in America. They want to control them to make them conform in the way they want them to conform later in life. And so that is why the purpose of control and understanding that's what they really want here is so important in these discussions.
Yeah, you said we weren't going to cover it, but I think it's because they think that they know better than the parents in some cases, and they want to use the school system to drive themselves as a wedge between the parents and their kids. That's why you see in California, this had to go to the Supreme Court, but in California, they did pass a law to keep secrets from parents when kids were confused about gender ideology in classrooms. And it's just totally crazy how they tried to use the heavy hand of government to say, oh no, we're going to keep parents in the dark, and try to insinuate that the parents were the true abusers, that the parents were somehow incapable of handling these sensitive topics with their kids, but somehow a government employee is going to be in a better position to do so without collaboration from the parents. It was just crazy.
No matter what the topic is, the idea that you would keep a secret from a parent over any topic is just so fundamentally wrong. Think about the way the system is set up, and I'm not suggesting all these are bad laws, but you have compulsory education. And then in a place like California, you have virtually no opportunity for educational freedom to send your child to a school if you don't like what that particular school is doing to your child. And then to make matters worse, they force you to go to a particular school based on your postal mailing address, which is still the dumbest thing you could do. And then after that, they're like, and we're going to do things with your children and not even tell you about it. If you don't think this is about control, you need to really reevaluate your thought process on how our education system works in America.
Well, and it's not even a majority inflicting their will on a minority, which is bad enough, right? If you're not in the majority popular opinion, that doesn't mean that your kid should have to suffer from the ideas of a majority, which could be wrong from time to time. It's worse than that, because with special interest politics, it's more so a fringe radical minority, namely the teachers' unions and the superintendents' unions and so on and so forth, who get to inflict their will on the majority of parents who basically don't get a say in so many of these public school systems. What is your grade for the Minnesota teacher saying the quiet part out loud?
A plus. Thank goodness we finally have an example on the record to show people what this is all about. We all knew this, that really delve into this issue over time, but for her to say it publicly in a recorded fashion like that, thank you for doing so.
Yeah, thank you for saying the quiet part out loud. And
Yeah.
we also had, which I'm going to skip ahead to this other story. I was going to take a while to get to this one, but let's skip forward since we're talking about the teachers unions really showing themselves. And here we go. Our favorite, Randy Weingarten, the head of the American Federation of Teachers, they just passed a resolution, I believe about a week ago, and it was to boycott Target. Why, you ask? Because they were not sufficiently anti-ICE. And so we talked, I believe, on this show a couple episodes ago, how Randy Weingarten was caught in a meeting with her members bragging about how she met with Target executives, pressuring them, saying that, oh, well, you know, our retirement accounts with our union invest in Target. And if you don't do what we want, meaning if you don't take a public stance against ICE, well, we're going to reevaluate our investments in your company. She took it a step further. Her union just passed an official resolution telling their 1.8 million members to boycott Target. I mean, what in the world is going on where you have the union boss? I mean, this has nothing to do with education. She's showing how it's basically a political entity. She wants to use the leverage of the union members, their money and their retirement accounts, and to put her thumb on the scale and to tell her members that you can't go shop at Target anymore because Target isn't out protesting against ICE in the streets like you're doing. One last thing. The Texas State Teachers Association sent out a text blast several days ago to encourage people in Texas to go protest the Trump administration for a No King's Day, which is a ridiculous name. We all know we don't have a king. We have a duly elected president. The teachers unions don't like to admit that Trump won, I guess, in November of 24. But here you have it. The teachers union was encouraging people with using their resources. I would guess that union dues went towards those text messages campaigns to tell people to go protest Trump and the administration this past Saturday. It's so, they've gone so far off course from educating kids. It's just, you almost can't make it up at this point.
It's, you know, the old saying, a broken clock is right twice a day. I'm still waiting for the first time Randy Weingarten's right on anything. The reality is that this is making the case that we at AFFT fight for each and every day, and that is to get union dues money out of politics. What she's doing here again and giving us a perfect example. So you almost want to give her an A, but in my mind, I can never give her anything other than an F. But she's making the case like Target has nothing to do with teachers and children, right? ICE doesn't have anything to do with teachers and children. And so she's off in la-la land working on radical political ideas, no matter which side she's on, doesn't really matter. She's out there taking teachers' money. These teachers who work hard, most of them are fantastic people doing a great job dedicating their lives to children. She's taking their money and using it for these political purposes that have nothing to do with education. So when you hear Corey and I talking about this, beating this drumbeat again and again, get union dues money out of politics, give it back to the people who earned it, the teachers. This is what we're talking about. And so, and then she uses her troops to go out there and go against any teacher who would dare leave the union. Like imagine the workplace environment where you say to yourself, you know what, I don't want Randy Weingarten blowing my money. I earned that money. Well, now you got to go deal with all of your colleagues that she's got all ginned up against you that will come after you and harass you for leaving the union. And see, this is what's so fundamentally wrong about it. She needs to go. Teachers need to opt out if they don't want their money being used for this. There's other union organizations you can actually join that don't involve themselves in all this nonsense. But she is the perfect example. And thankfully, she said it out loud. Hey, we're going to worry about Target. We're going to worry about ICE. We're going to worry about everything except the children that need to be taught.
It's just totally crazy. And I have a video of her from the No Kings rally in Minnesota, of all places, that she was leading the troops. And of course, she's jumping around as usual. So Randy Weingarten gets an F. And I will say her sister union, the NEA, I saw in their LM2 reports, less than 9% of their funding goes towards representing teachers every year, yet tens of millions of dollars at least go towards political purposes. And that's according to their own publicly available LM2 reports. But here is the video of Randy Weingarten. She's always swinging her arms around. She's at the No Kings. Let's see if we can hear a little bit of what she's saying.
The people solves the people's problems is if it is a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. That's why standing up and showing up, being in solidarity like millions of us are doing today is so important. It is the only way we can get the government to act in our interests, act in our kids' interests, act in working people's interests. It's the only way we can tackle.
All right, I've had enough of Randy Weingarten. I think I put that video too long. But look, so there she is screaming at these anti-Trump protests, screaming against immigration enforcement. And Chip hit the nail on the head. He pointed out that there's a lot of teachers who said, enough is enough. We are opting out of our union. And I think that's the way to starve the beast. It's another one of the stories I wanted to cover. There have been just about 2,000 employees have contacted Americans for Fair Treatment already for help with opting out of their public sector unions in 7 months alone. So it's a lot of momentum in a short amount of time. I will say there is another group as well that you pointed out. There were other groups. There's a Teacher Freedom Alliance. They've been around longer. They've been around for a year. This number is actually about 13,000 teachers have opted out of their unions and joined an alternative, which is called the Teacher Freedom Alliance. So you can contact them. You can contact Americans for Fair Treatment for help with opting out too. You could just type on Google AFFT opt out, and you'll find the page of how to contact us to opt out of your union as well. But I think this is the only way, Chip, that we start to hold the union bosses like Randy accountable, because they're so like drunk on power that they feel like they don't have to change. They can continue engaging in political activity. They still have all the money coming in. Randy Weingarten and Becky Pringle each make over $500,000 a year themselves, whereas teacher salaries are basically flat for decades. They're not seeing the money because it's all being squandered by union leadership, wasting it on their political pet projects. So, yeah, I'd say school choice is part of the solution. It holds districts accountable, holds the monopoly accountable, but we need teacher choice too to hold the union bosses accountable.
You know what's so funny about this? It's interesting when people just first of all, I'm not one that supports, chanting and wearing bright yellow shirts and holding handmade signs, oftentimes that are including misspelled words. But I know Randy Weingarten and the folks who follow her seem to enjoy that. But the No Kings thing, and I'm not going to delve too far in this because it gets a little off topic, but it's interesting because, first of all, if there was a king, he or she wouldn't even allow these protests to happen. So we can start with that, obvious. But the second thing is that she used the words of President Lincoln. And look, President Lincoln went down in history as one of the greatest American presidents of all time. And he brought back together the nation at a time when it certainly needed to be reunited. And we fought the only internal fight we've ever had in our nation's history. But if anyone could have been claimed or could have been accused of being a king, it would have been actually President Lincoln, because he literally suspended habeas corpus during that time, which is a fundamental constitutional right. And this is not in any way, shape, or form suggesting that Lincoln did something wrong, but that was a very controversial issue at the time that took on king-like tendencies of suspending habeas corpus outside the Constitution of the U.S. And so it's funny that she would use his words. She may not even know that that's who said those words. It's funny that she would use his words in that type of rally. It's just, she's just a caricature of herself. It's just a bunch of nonsense. But again, I get back to the fact that she's taking the money from these teachers who've worked really hard to earn it and using it for stupid rallies like that and going after Target and, ICE stuff. Like, let the teachers keep their own money, get out of politics.
Yeah, I've seen a poll from Education Week. So it needs to be redone. There needs to be an updated one. This was from 2017. And they found that at least a quarter of teachers identify as conservatives. And, I think it actually might be higher than that if you exclude independents or have people leaning, and because I think a plurality of those in that poll were identified as independents. Most of them voted for Hillary that year as opposed to Donald Trump. But I think there's probably a little more than a quarter of teachers as conservatives. Why in the world would you continue to send your money through the union to political candidates who you disagree with? I mean, this is why we wanted the Supreme Court for the Janus decision in 2018 that, which says in red state, blue state, wherever you live in America, if you're a public sector employee, like a public school teacher, you can't be compelled to pay union dues because that would violate your First Amendment rights. And something you hit on a second ago, Chip, was that, we're compelled to go to these schools, especially if we can't afford to get out of them. We're forced to pay for them through the property tax system. And I would say, and in order to get a good grade, you basically have to regurgitate the information that the teacher tells you. I would say that the government school system today is a violation of our First Amendment rights because it's basically a form of compelled government speech unless you have school choice. Because if you have school choice, it's not much of a problem. You can sort into the school, have the money follow you. That is aligned with your values. But the problem is you're in this one-size-fits-all system. Everybody's forced into it, especially low income. You're compelled under compulsory education. And I'd say it's a form of compelled government speech and a First Amendment violation. And then the obvious other violation, I'd argue, is that it's a 14th Amendment free exercise clause. It's a free exercise clause violation of the First Amendment as well, because parents, if they want their kids to be raised in a religious household, they may feel like they have to send their kid to a religious school. So they have no choice but to pay out of pocket for a private religious school because the public schools can't be religious. And Chip and I aren't arguing that all schools should be religious. And but what I'm arguing is that if you are, and even if you're not, you should be able to take your money to a school that is or not based on your views and how you want to raise your children. So I'd say the only way out of this mess is through freedom, not force, and allow people to choose.
But even from a taxpayer standpoint, Corey, we took the parental part out of it, which is clearly the most important part. So I don't want anyone to misconstrue that. But even from a taxpayer standpoint, I used to make this argument all the time, is that we know that an educated society is less costly than an uneducated society. We know that for certain. So there's a value in society investing into education. But if we're going to invest, if taxpayers are going to have money extricated from them against their will and take that money to be used for education, then we should expect that it be used in the best way possible. We should expect the greatest return on investment. The great Milton Friedman used to talk about this all the time. Why does America have the best post-secondary education system in the world, but among, middle of the road when it comes to first grade through 12th, right? And the reason is because people choose what college they go to. You're not mandated to go to a college. You get to choose. And so the colleges have to create value that the student or the tuition paying parent ultimately wants. If they don't create the value, no one will go to that college. And that's why the U.S. system for colleges and universities is the best in the world. Why would we not apply that exact same theory to first grade through 12th grade? Well, we would if the unions weren't stopping it, right?
Exactly. That's why.
Yeah.
That's why all these union-backed politicians support choice when it comes to pre-K and higher ed, because there's no special interest status quo blocking choice, because choice is the norm. But with K through 12, they have that monopoly. They want to hold on to that money as much as possible in your kids' formative years as much as possible as well. We have a breaking update, Chip, and this is from Idaho, so we got to bring it up. It's the name of the tweet. The bill that we referenced, we knew this was going to happen. It easily passed the House, 43-23. Now we can officially spike the football and point out that it's going to go to the governor's desk. So no more taxpayer funding of teachers' unions once Governor Little, a Republican, signs that bill that's heading to his desk as we speak. It's great news. Hopefully more states follow in their footsteps.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe I just dreamed this, didn't Governor Pritzker just say he was going to join, or was that one of our news stories? Join the Trump school choice?
I don't know. That's a pretty big deal if Governor Pritzker says he's going to do it. You can Google that real quick. That's news to me if that actually is happening, because currently we have 28 states that have opted in, but only one Democrat, Jared Polis of Colorado, from what I've seen, has said he's doing it. The other 27 are Republican. 26 are governors that are Republican, and one state has a Democrat governor, Kentucky, that has had the legislature push the governor to opt in after he vetoed it. They overrode the veto, and so from what I can tell, we have 28 states. So let's see, J.B. Pritzker. You tell me if you've found anything on that.
I'm looking. I might have just been dreaming that.
Or maybe you have maybe you have insider knowledge that nobody else has at this point, or maybe you have a crystal ball. I don't see anything. No, I don't see anything at all. That would surprise me if that was the case. But
yeah. When I read it, I was very surprised, but it might have been
a tweet from someone who's spiking the football too early. We'll see.
Yeah.
But I do have another story from we mentioned the Freedom Foundation. I just saw this in the Wall Street Journal's editorial board. I didn't know this was happening. Apparently, it's already on the books in Oregon, where they have a law that doesn't allow groups like the Freedom Foundation or other think tanks to advertise to school district employees that they can opt out of their government unions. This seems like a layup in court, because this is their First Amendment right. What do you mean you can't tell teachers that they can opt out of the union? So the Oregon legislature apparently already passed a law to do this, to block them from telling teachers they can opt out of the union. I mean, it's just insanity to me. And it looks like it has got the Wall Street Journal's attention because other states are replicating the bill. New York and Hawaii, they also have legislation to do the same thing. This law was written, quote, to discourage the Freedom Foundation, which sends mailers out to union members, reminding them they can opt out of the union and save money under the Supreme Court's Janus ruling. The union protection legislation is intended to stifle the Freedom Foundation's speech, which is an effort to inform public employees of their own First Amendment rights to decline union membership. I went and read that editorial, and it looks like it was nixed by a lower court, but now it's on appeals. I think the lower court said there's no standing here because no one's actually been harmed. But this is an obvious First Amendment violation. And, Chip, I think we do similar work at the Americans for Fair Treatment, of just letting people know that they can opt out of their union. I don't see how in the world Oregon has been able to get away with this long. Hopefully there's some good news in the future. There's no way that this law stands going forward. It's got to be struck down.
Yes. It's ridiculous. That, again, it kind of goes back to that same theme of people not wanting to share information, whether it be with parents or taxpayers or people that have constitutional rights to opt out of unions. They'd prefer to hide it as opposed to share it. I did find that for you, Corey, and I sent it to you. It looks like it's probably a parody account.
Of course.
But Brian Costin, who's usually pretty good on the issues, was the one who posted it. So
huge thanks to Governor Pritzker for changing his position on the federal tax credits program. I honestly never thought this would happen. So where is the parody account?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
There it is. There it is. Are we sure this isn't an April Fool's joke? Does it sound like Governor Pritzker? Yeah, dang it. So it was a April Fool's joke. They got us. Even though it's April 2nd, yes. He posted it on April 1st. So that's where. Okay, so J.B. Pritzker, for the record, has not opted in, even though in 2022, Chip, he did say to local media that he supported the state tax credit scholarship program, and that, oh, if a bill got to his desk to save the program, he would sign it, probably knowing a bill was never going to get to his desk to save the program because of the union-dominated legislature in Illinois. So we got a few more stories. Let's try to rapid fire through them. Someone DM'd this one to me, and I guess this is a real picture of Tony Evers. I don't know why he would post it. He looks kind of nerdy in here, but he was a former superintendent of a public school district. And at first, I didn't know why he posted this. Someone DM'd it to me and said, Tony Evers is really giving off real George Wallace vibes, which prompted me to reply to him this excellent quote by Governor Doug Ducey in Arizona when they passed their universal school choice program. Here it is.
50 plus years ago, politicians stood in the schoolhouse door and wouldn't let minorities in. Today, union-backed politicians stand in the schoolhouse door and won't let minorities out. Many of our poor kids and children of color are trapped in a failing school. It's time to set these families free.
Bam. That was a beautiful day in Arizona in 2022. It's like the first person to run the 4-minute mile. He broke the barrier, and Bannister, I believe his name was, and showed other states that you could do it. And Tony Evers it was not a good day, because it turns out he posted that because he vetoed a bill from the Republican legislature that would have opted in the state into the new federal tax credit scholarship program. It doesn't touch a single dollar of the public school budgets. They are private charitable contributions. And if you don't opt in, that means those scholarships are going to be flowing out of your state voluntarily to scholarships for kids in places like Florida and Texas that have opted in. Governor Jared Polis said it was a no-brainer decision for him why he opted in. But it looks like Tony Evers, he's siding with the teachers unions, even though it doesn't hurt the teachers unions one bit. I guess it could reduce their control in some way, because some kids might get a chance to go somewhere else, even though it doesn't cost a single dollar.
Well, when you hear some of these politicians, and Governor Evers is one of them most recently, who talk about how this is going to take money away from the public schools, again, one of two things is happening. Either they actually don't even understand how it works, which is shocking and sad if the governor of a state doesn't understand what he or she is saying they're not going to support or oppose, or they so disrespect the people they're talking to, their constituency, that they can just flat out lie to them and not care about any of the repercussions. One of those two things has to be true. And this is the case again, because as you pointed out, we've documented it 1,000 times here. This has nothing to do with Wisconsin public funding at all. This is a federal tax credit that Wisconsin taxpayers can opt into on their federal tax liability, not the state liability. It has nothing to do with state funding. If he doesn't know that, he shouldn't be the governor. If he does know that and he lies directly to the people of Wisconsin the way he's doing here, then he also should not be governor. Like, there are certain things, like if you're not willing to be to tell the truth, or if you're not willing to be smart enough to actually look at the facts, you don't need to be leading a state. You don't need to be leading a city, a county, or anything.
Yeah, exactly. And some people in a news story on this, this veto, were pointing out that, it's not like we can wait until Governor Evers is gone. Yes, the program starts in 2027. That's when you can start donating and getting the federal tax credit during that tax year. But his term is over in 2027. That's true, but he's in office until right after the deadline for your state to opt in, which is early January 2027. And so people are pointing out that even after he's out of office in 2027, even if a Republican or someone who supports school choice gets in, they'll have to wait until 2028 in order to do the opt-in, even though he'll be out basically the entire 2027 year. So let's we're already going over time, but let's try to do a speed round of some other stories. I think that's some good news. There's the Chicago Teachers Union is being sued right now by members of their own union because they failed to provide required financial audits. And guess what? There was just a good news. The Chicago Teachers Union wanted to have this dismissed, but the court in Illinois just ordered the case against them to proceed to discovery. This is going to be great. That means we get to see all of the great, crazy stuff that's happening within the Chicago Teachers Union and their finances. I can't wait to see what happens throughout the discovery process. Arizona, this tweet blew up. They had a bill pass their Senate. It's pretty simple. It requires the public school system to spend at least 60% of just their operational funding, not total funding, but just their operational funding on the classroom, on instruction and on teachers and other classroom expenses. All the Democrats voted against it.
Let me on that one, Corey. I find it extremely interesting because it's literally saying you have to spend more money on teachers in public schools.
Yeah, but they said, "Oh, local control, and this is micromanaging the districts, and it's I mean, it shouldn't be hard to hit at least 60%. The problem is,
I worked on this issue 20 years ago, and I can tell you the numbers are real clear. The more money that goes into the classroom, the better the test scores ultimately are. Because it's not getting wasted on a bloated overhead at the district office, which is sadly so prevalent in today's public school system. Put the money in the classroom, pay the teachers and pay them well, and you'll get better results.
Yeah. And, at the end of the day, local control in general is a good idea. But I think the most local form of control there is the parent. They should be in charge. But Democrats fight against that too, or other union-backed politicians. And, if you think about it, during COVID, when DeSantis ordered the local school districts to open when they tried to keep themselves closed as long as possible, I think that was a step in the right direction because it empowered individual families to get what they wanted out of the school system. And so I just like to point out there's some state level policies that could theoretically subvert local control. But the thing is, the school districts are looking out for themselves and not the parents and their kids. And you think about other policies like this, like, for example, I mean, I've made the argument that states should pass through their legislatures, and Tennessee's moving to do so, to force the local school districts to not enroll illegal immigrants and students, and because that saves the taxpayer at the end of the day. You might say, oh, well, that's local control, but the local school districts are going to enroll as many illegals as they want. Why? Because they're funded, like you said earlier, based on student enrollment count. So they don't care if the student's there legally or not. But at the end of the day, the taxpayers getting stuck footing the bill that with those grants that come from the state. So let's. There's a couple more stories, so we'll go through those. Bam, bam, bam. There's a bill in Maryland to force all private schools to hand their admissions processes over to the government. The religious schools would be forced to embrace transgender insanity. It passed along party lines. All Democrats, 98 of them voted for it. 33 Republicans, all Republicans but 2 voted against it. There were 2 Republicans who voted with the 98 Democrats. I got to look into them, see if they were endorsed by the teachers union too, but it's just crazy. I mean, this goes from pre-K through college. It's not even K through 12. It's basically cradle to grave, the government controlling the private education. And I just got to point out the Orwellian name of the bill: advancing equal education opportunities for all students in Maryland. Yeah, by controlling all of the private schools under the hand of government, straight out of 1984. I just heard in my direct messages before we started this live stream from a senator who's a Republican in Maryland, sent me a direct message and said, I saw you posted about that bill in the House. He thinks it's not even going to get a vote in the Senate. And that would be great. he's been talking with Democrats and other Republicans to try to put a stop to it, because they're hearing a lot from their constituents that this is a problem.
A better course of action is if you live in Maryland, just move.
Yeah, there you go. Vote with your feet. Yeah. Come to Florida, come to Texas. Okay, and real quick, we had a Supreme Court decision banning there was a law banning so-called conversion therapy in Colorado. Supreme Court had a bipartisan ruling. Courts aren't supposed to be partisan, but we know there's like 3 liberal justices on the court. 2 of them joined the conservative majority, and now it was a 8-1 decision with only Justice Jackson, who doesn't know what a woman is as the lone dissent. And basically, even Kagan writing the concurring opinion said, like, we wouldn't like it if it went the other way. If a state were to try to ban gender affirming speech, because this had to do with just the talking part of the therapy. And so even they, kind of said that, that this law in Colorado is unconstitutional.
How 2 things thoughts came to mind. And on these speech cases, I always remind people, like, the founders so valued the idea of free speech that they made it the First Amendment.
Yep.
Now, I'm not suggesting that all the amendments are done in order of importance, but clearly at the top of their mind was the freedom of speech, because that's what they were getting away from in the oppressive British government at the time. Right. And so this is like the hallmark of what it means to be an American. All the justices except one, and we're starting to see this pattern again and again, where one justice, she seems to be out there on her own. And I've been reading a lot about her, and it's just, you're beginning to draw the conclusion that she's there not as a member of the judiciary. She's literally there as a political cheerleader.
Yep.
And if you look at some of the questions that she asks, and she asks a lot of questions, more than over half the other justices combined. She doesn't really get it. Like, she's missing what her job is as a Supreme Court justice. And even some of the other liberal justices are looking at her like, wow, like, you're on the Supreme Court. Like, what are you doing? And then the case, I know it's a totally different case, and we're not going to get into this today, but the 14th Amendment case, where you're talking about, the jurisdiction of, where she asked, well, if I'm arrested for shoplifting in Japan, aren't I under the jurisdiction of the Japanese government? Which, of course, has nothing to do with what the people who created that amendment were talking about. And I mean, she's out there, and we could spend a whole show talking about it. But wow,
it's just she's just basically repeating Democrat talking points and has no regard for the Constitution. And I will say, when Biden chose her, or before he chose her, I remember that viral clip of him just saying, it's going to be a black woman. And it's like, why is that the most important thing that Joe Biden had on his mind, as this is why, I don't even know if he had picked her or not at that point, but especially if he hadn't picked her, why in the world is that his criteria for who's going to be on the Supreme Court, first of all? And then 2, if he did pick her already, then why is that the most important part about her, that's what you need to kind of virtue signal to the rest of the world? I think that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. It's like, let people get there based on their merits, not just, not this whole, DEI concept that Joe Biden was putting forward when he picked someone for the Supreme Court. I think that irritated a lot of people.
Well, the problem is when you pick people for any position and you do it on something other than merit, it could be race, could be gender, it could be they're left-handed, I don't know, anything other than merit, then what you're essentially saying is, I'm choosing someone on a God-given characteristic that they had no control over. Yep. And you're putting them into a group. You're saying, I'm choosing this group of people that share this characteristic. And then when they're not prepared, like she clearly isn't, and they fail like she clearly does on a regular basis, then in some ways it reflects on the entire group that you chose to choose, right? And so when you pick someone on their individual merit and they fail or they succeed, either way, they're either given credit, or they're looked at and said, well, you failed, but it's on them. It's on that individual. It's not on a whole group of people. It's not on a race, a gender, a left-handed, right-handed. it's based on that individual, which is why it's so important to always choose based on individual qualifications and nothing else. And in this case, it's pretty clear that she was not prepared for this level of intellectual legal thought.
Yep, that's right. All right, we have two other quick. We're way over. We have a federal court just ordered California to pay $4.5 million in attorney's fees for the Mirabelli-Vanta case. This is the case where the Supreme Court weighed in, basically saying that, you know what, California, no more keeping secrets from parents if a child is confused about their gender at school. So that's a huge win for parental rights. This was a federal court judge, I think his name's Roger Benitez, who initially said that, you know, these secrecy policies create a trifecta of harm. They hurt the kids, they hurt the teachers, and they hurt parents by keeping them in the dark. And the last story is out of Kentucky. So Kentucky, they passed a bill banning taxpayer-funded advocacy on ballot measures. So when they tried to pass their constitutional amendment that had to do with school choice like a year or so ago, the school districts were using district resources, taxpayer-funded resources, to lobby against the school choice amendment. That was illegal under Kentucky law already, but there were no punishments attached to it. So the Attorney General, Coleman, came out and said, hey, you really shouldn't be doing this. He sent out a strongly worded letter, but nothing happened because there was no teeth behind it. But now this bill would make it at least a misdemeanor. The original version of the bill made it a felony. There was some other stuff included in there as well. It got watered down a little bit in the committee process. It's now a misdemeanor, but it is a step in the right direction to stop forcing taxpayers to fund political campaigns. I mean, this should be a no-brainer, but at least Kentucky's. Yeah. I'm interested to see what Andy Beshear will do. I bet he'll try to veto it.
That's the only question here. I mean, he has to understand based on those numbers that if he vetoes it, it's going to get overridden.
Yeah, he knows.
Yeah, and I mean, I lost all faith in Andy Beshear quite some time ago, so he'll probably do the wrong thing here. But even politically, he should look at this and say, "Wow, I'm going to get overridden quite clearly on something that is just totally black and white. This is an easy one."
Yep. All right, cool. I think we should call it a day. We have a lot of people watching. I wish we could stay on longer. Maybe that's why we went over, because we didn't want to lose you guys. But you can always watch us in a couple of weeks. This was the Red Pen Podcast with Chip Rogers, CEO of Americans for Fair Treatment, and myself, Corey DeAngelis. Thank you guys so much for coming out. We have so much. One of these days, we're not going to go over an hour. I mean, we just have so much to talk about. It's great news. Thank you guys all for joining us. And Chip, thanks for joining the show.
Thanks, Corey. Talk soon.